Oh my god.
Valley.
Are you kidding?
Oh, nice. Hey, what is up, YouTube? How's it going, everyone? Well, today we are going to go over the character I put together. And the character that you saw at the beginning of this video, which found the apothecary. Now, this apothecary did not actually drop from a strong box, which is kind of surprising because most of the stuff you find are generally from strong boxes. Now, this character has been pushed to the maximum in terms of quantity. I really wanted to try to push the envelope and try to get the maximum amount of quantity that you can possibly have in a temp league. And I think that we've pretty much reached the maximum. Can't really get it any higher. So we're going to go into exactly what we did, how the character actually functions if you want to copy it for whatever reason. And lastly, the diminishing returns of quantity and how bad it really affects you after 100% or 120% or even 140%. Now, if you saw my last video, I actually finished chancing the Wind Ripper, and it is complete. And I am using Ethereal Knives, because Ethereal Knives is one of the best scaling skills in the game, especially with Headhunter. Once you get to like level 28, 29, each additional level grants you an insane amount of flat damage. And all of this physical damage, since it is physical, gets converted, and you also get a bunch of physics extra with Headhunter buffs. So it's just a perfect scenario that you are able to get a lot of damage while investing very, very little into damage on the tree and your actual items. Now, this build does rely on an ore bot for its damage and survivability. I'm not actually running any damage ores. I'm running Purity of Elements just so that I can be ailment immune, and I'm running Heralds because ore bots can't really run Heralds. Now, I did set the quest to get the highest quantity possible. I wanted to try to run with as much quantity as possible to kind of get a better understanding of, is there actually a diminishing return, and is the diminishing return a little bit better when you have group play going on. So overall, for the character, I did choose Pathfinder. Now, I did get a lot of this inspiration for this character from someone called Agromorph. If you want to go check him out, he does stream Defiled Cathedral. However, he has an Inquisitor. And I have a lot of people asking me, why Inquisitor and why are you Pathfinder? Well, Pathfinder is definitely the best ascendancy in terms of getting as much quantity and rarity as possible. And this is because of all these Flask Effect nodes. Now, Flask Effect directly gains your character quantity because of the item Divination Distillate. Divination Distillate is 12% increased quantity. Now, for most ascendancies, there's no way to get more quantity or more rarity, and it's always just going to be a damage thing. Now, since damage is never going to be an issue in a party, getting Flask Effect is literally the only way to get more quantity and rarity. And on Pathfinder, you get around 30% Flask Effect from these small travel nodes. You also get 30% increased effect of a magic utility flask. And this is important because we're using a gold flask with increased effect and rarity. So without Pathfinder, you can see right here, since we go to the calc section, we have 132% or 147% once we take into account Wind Ripper. Without Pathfinder, you can see you lose 8% quant, and it's not exactly ideal. So that is why I do think that Pathfinder is the best magic finding ascendancy in the game if damage doesn't matter. Now, this character is focused on Flask Effect. There are a few areas for Flask Effect on the tree outside of the ascendancy. There's 10% over here. And these small travel nodes are what, that's why I take it. I do anoint on Natural Remedies. Natural Remedies provides another 10% Flask Effect. And then lastly, there's this node over here that gets you 5% increased effect. And every little bit matters. This is a game of incremental improvement. So people, you might think it's a meme to try to stack all this Flask Effect. However, we're trying to do everything possible to squeeze out the maximum amount of quant. Now, next up, we have another Flask Effect thing. Alchemist Genius grants you like 10% Flask Effect if you use the flask. So right there, we can see we get a little bit more quant and rarity. So we also have a bunch of Flask Effect. And this Flask Effect is also helpful for making the character tankier because this scales the Progenesis. So if you see Progenesis and Taste of Hate does offer us a lot of survivability. Now, next up, we have Elegant Hubris. Now, one of the benefits of Inquisitor is they actually path over here. And there's actually an Elegant Hubris that gives you 200% rarity over here. However, I chose one for 160% rarity. And I put it over here so you can see it. What Elegant Hubris does is it takes away all of the travel nodes and it changes the notables to something different. So one of the options is rarity. So you can see right here, we have 40% rarity here, 40% rarity there, 40% rarity there, and lastly, 40% rarity there. And it's a very, very low amount of points that you have to take. And these are the main travel nodes. And Caspiro for Elegant Hubris also makes it so we ignore attribute requirements. So a lot of people ask me, how do you actually have all of your gems and your items equipped where your attributes are low? And the real reason is because Caspiro makes it so that we don't need attribute requirements. It kind of works like how Omni does. And this Caspiro also grants us 37% chaos res over here, and also I think 80% crit chance over here. So it's a very, very point efficient, and this one only costs around 20 divines. The one with 200% rarity in this region costs around 100 divines. There's a pretty big difference in cost. Now next up, we are using a Wind Ripper, and Wind Ripper's main benefit is that it grants you 15% increased quantity of items dropped by slaying frozen enemies. So freeze is really important, so that's why I end up taking this thing, which increases the duration of cold ailments. And in order to freeze the enemy, you have to freeze it for a certain duration, or the freeze gets discarded. So this makes it so that we need a smaller hit in order to freeze the enemy. So it's very, very nice. And most importantly, it gives us 40% of fizz converted to cold. Now, lastly, we also have the Caster Mastery. The Caster Mastery is something that I unspec and spec in the map depending on if I finish the altar. So once I spec this node is when there's the box opening time. And specking this node allows you, as long as you're casting, to have a chance to open the box. So if you just like cast the bunch near a bunch of boxes, all of the boxes will be able to open, and you won't be really that afraid of any of the ground degen or detonate dead. Now, lastly, the build is kind of compact. We are taking some of the aura nodes right here for charisma, and we aren't running damage auras ourselves, so we don't really need that much reservation efficiency. And we are relying on Pierce instead of Chain because we don't really have the gem sockets to run chains since we're running item rarity. And we are running Blast Freeze to get more freeze effect or freeze chance on enemies, and Doriani's Lessons for the elemental damage leaves us life. And then we are running Repeater and Streamline, and these give us a lot of damage and also gives us a lot of projectile speed. So as you can see, this build is very, very niche. It's kind of a weird little mix that I made in order to get the most magic find possible. And I did take these nodes over here, 10% life, and the reason we do this is because it gets us so critical strikes have culling, which is very, very nice, especially when you're doing any sort of mapping. Now, next up, how much quantity does this character get? So we have 15% from Wind Ripper, and you get, 15% here, but the enemies have to be frozen, and you get 30% rarity from slaying shocked enemies. This quiver doesn't really get anything. Next up, we have this item over here, and this gives you 7% quant. This is from a Glimpse of Chaos that someone corrupted, and the Glimpse of Chaos has this little special benefit where they have a different set of implicit modifiers that you can get, and 7% quant happens to be one of them. Next up, we're using a Grease Embrace with 15% quant and 49% rarity. Sedimas is 10% quant. Gold Worms is 20% quant. Eyes of the Great Wolf is 20% quant. Yeah, I think this one is supposed to be 20%. I actually don't currently have a 20% one, but I was using one yesterday, so there's 20%. 15% for Pariahs. Make sure you have a white socket. And Piranha's Blaze It is the best way to get more quant. You can also use Abisco's Leash, but I wanted to make a character with the most quant possible, and this is 5% plus 8%. So 13% quant on this Piranha's Blaze It. So overall, when we go to the calc section, you will see that with Ethereal Knives, we have 134% quant. And if you take into account the 15% from the Wind Ripper, we have 150% quant nearly. And we do have 477% rarity. You'll see that this number is not as high as a lot of other setups. You could technically get 600% or 800% rarity. A lot of people use Ascetic, which is 100% rarity. Some people also get a rarity on the helm. You can get rarity on the belt. So there's so many different ways to get more rarity. But this character is meant to get as much quantity as possible. And I think 149% is the theoretical max. Now, a lot of people might be wondering, is this worth it? item quality has diminishing returns, and we don't really know the exact formula. However, some people did run a bunch of Hillocks back in the day. I think this was for 2015. They kind of set a baseline of the amount of drops that happened from Hillock at 0% quant. I think it was at like 516. And then they ran Hillock a bunch of times, and they saw how many drops they actually got. So if you look at it, you'll see that the average drops, like 80% more, you would expect should have 80% more drops. However, that's not the case. The average that you actually get for having 80% more quant is a lot lower than just having 80% straight up more items from the baseline. And you'll see right here even that rarity has a pretty significant diminishing return after like 200%. Like the first 200% of the rarity is the most important, and then afterwards it kind of falls off a lot more. And in fact, when you have more quant, somehow the rarity even goes down in terms of the number of rare drops you have, and that's probably just too low of a sample size. However, the important thing is I found this right here, is that there's some formula that predicts the amount of drops that you'll get, and it also shows you the benefit from the previous 10%, and this is a sample observed drop rate. So what you'll see here is that when you have 100% quant, in reality, it predicts you to have around 56% more loot. So instead of having 2 times the amount of loot, you have 1.56 times. And then for the sample observed drop rate, it was around 1.58 times. So you can see immediately that each amount, 10% extra, is giving less and less. So the first 10%, it gives you 8% more predicted drops. And then the next 10%, 6%. The next 10%, 7%. And then 6%. And then 6%, then 5%, and once you're at the 100% value, it's around 3% more drops per 10%, and then once you get into the 140, 150 range, it's around 2% more per 10%. So you get less and less items the more quant you have. So obviously, once you get to 150%, each 10% extra is adding a tiny amount to the amount of drops that you'll be getting. Now, party play does make this little bonus a bit better because that little bonus is multiplied by the party play multiplier. And that's why I'm trying to maximize the amount of quant that you could possibly have. Now, this is something I found. This was in the 2015 section in the forums. And this person says, diminishing returns, I'll take as much MF gear as possible. And even back then, people realized the number one way to get more loot and more quant is to just optimize your farm and run more maps per hour. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, if you want one from this video, is that your quantity probably does not matter as much as how efficiently you play and how many maps per hour you do. Now, let me know down in the comments below how many apothecaries you think I'll drop. I'll probably run around like a 100 map sample size at the Fall Cathedral and party play with around 145 to 150% quant and 6-man or 5-man party play. I think the rate is probably around 10 to 15 maps per apothecary. But I'm really curious as to what you think it will be. You know, yesterday we ran around 11 maps and we dropped an apothecary. And I think the best map we had actually dropped 7 years bad luck. And I think we found 4 lightens in one map. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more mirrors, devices, and apothecaries than me. And see you next time. Bye.